Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another work session of the Education and Culture Committee. Today, we're going to be discussing our CIP, or Capital Improvement Program budget for Montgomery County Public Schools. I want to open by just some initial remarks and then allow my colleagues to do the same. We are in a unique position this year from many other years. We've been demanding, requesting, pleading, praying for the state to give us additional resources. And over the past couple of years with Build to Learn and other kinds of state support, we've seen additional dollars flow to not only Montgomery County, but counties across the state. And we're greatly appreciative to our state delegation in Annapolis, who continues to work hard to make sure that we have additional funding that can make sure we can try and catch up with the backlog of capital projects that we have for our schools. The reality is, and we've said this for very long, that because we've waited so long for those resources to come, we have a long list of projects that extend from those that are complete renovations to systemic projects, just to keep some of our existing buildings going and keeping them up to the level that we know is commensurate with the level of education that's happening within those school walls. And so it's incredibly important for us to continue to fight for additional funds. It seems kind of weird that, we get more and we're asking for more, but the reality is that we've been far woefully behind for so long that we really are trying to catch up at this point. And this year's budget kind of reflects that. It's kind of an interesting one in which we have some projects that may potentially be delayed as a part of the non-recommended reductions, but at the same time, we don't have any projects that are actually taken out of the CIP. That is unique. That is something that is telling and speaks to the level of additional support that we're getting. But I do believe that with some of the bills that are in Annapolis, that there may be potentials for us to possibly accelerate some of the projects that we have identified as potential delays. So my message to our community is that we're still working. And you'll hear today about some of the non-recommended reduction suggestions from our Board of Education that we asked for. I want to be very clear, these are not recommended reductions that the board believes should happen. The board believes in their budget, and you'll hear from them. We have Ms. Harris from the Board of Education with us this morning, who can certainly espouse that view, and I'll give her an opportunity certainly to speak to that effect. But just want to be very clear. We want to do everything we can to try and keep all of these projects on track. That is our goal. We've raised taxes before to do it. We've done all kinds of things when it comes to a county to ensure we can do everything we can to keep our level of effort to where it needs to be, that's commensurate, again, with the education that we're seeing inside our schools. And so from that respect, I want to turn it over to my colleagues first for any opening remarks that they may have, and then turn it over to Ms. Harris from the Board of Education for any opening remarks, and then to staff. So Councilmember Demando.
Thank you, Chair Rice, and good morning, everybody here and in the community. I couldn't agree more wholeheartely than with the chair's opening remarks about how we've been woefully underfunded from the state, and we needed that money. And we've been paying, we pay a lot here in Montgomery County to support the rest of the state, and it's a good thing. But we also have a lot of need here, and that's something that I think all of us are aware of, but it always warrants being said. I'm very glad that Ms. Harris here, Lynn Harris, is here from the school board, and we'll hear their perspective. There are also some things that, and I've talked about this before, while the state has its responsibility, we have our own responsibility, and we've always funded education at a high level here in the county, and particularly not only the operating side, but the capital side. And we're at a point now where we're going to have to work together to figure out how we get through this time, at a time where thankfully the virus is heading in the right direction. Our kids' needs are great. Every day we have a moment where we're seeing how great the needs of our students are, and how this recovery period will be multiple years. And we're going to need to be planning both the physical infrastructure and all the services and human capital to support their needs of them and their families. We're having an ongoing conversation now about expanding services within schools, right? Things like wellness centers and the like, and other things that are going to require space and have impact to the capital budget. So I think it's incumbent on us to work, as we always have, together to find out what's the right mix of revenues that we can increase here at the county level with the state funding, working with the board to do all we can to mitigate these delays as we're trying to recover. And I've said that before, and I think I'm glad that I'm really looking forward to working with colleagues to do that. But I really appreciate MCPS, as they always do in my time. You know, the chair, my colleagues on the committee know this. They've seen it longer than I, but you always come back and do what's asked and make really tough decisions and present non-recommended cuts. So really appreciate the relationship there. But my perspective, you know, we need to do what we can to help allay those, and so that we're not accepting all these cuts. And we'll talk more about how we'll do that in the coming days and weeks, but just wanted to set that frame and appreciate the working relationship. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you very much, Councilmember Jawando. And, you know, it's really important what you said, because we need to keep reiterating that although we did get additional funds from the state, we're still well short of what it is that we really needed, even just to catch up, let alone accelerate like we need to. And so that's why bills like Delegate McIntosh's bill that's currently before the General Assembly are incredibly important. And I know that we've been working with our local legislators. I know that the Maryland Association of Counties has been working as well very hard to make sure that something like this moves forward, because all across the state, not just here in Montgomery County, we certainly are falling short still with those additional funds. And so the state is sitting on a surplus, and it's important to note that the state has additional funds. And so it is imperative that in times like this, that we invest in education, that we invest in our future, that we invest in our kids. And so from that standpoint, it is our hope. And I ask all those, Councilmember Jawando, you haven't said in a while, but for the millions that are watching at home, I know that'll end up on another clip somewhere, but for the millions that are watching at home, that they reach out to their state leaders and let them know about this bill and to please support it. It is incredibly important for us. And if you want to see these projects remain on track and not be delayed, the best way to do that is through additional state funding. So I see Board Member Harris nodding. So I'm going to jump straight to the presentation at this point, because I think that I've addressed where the board is in terms of being very clear that the board does not support any reductions from their budget, that the board has been adamant about making sure that all of these projects are incredibly important to keep on track. And we do understand and respect that, and are working very hard to make sure that that happens. So with that, let me turn to Mr. Levchenko and Ms. McGuire to walk us through the presentation, and then we'll get into discussion, which we can have a conversation all together.
Sure. And I'm going to share my screen and bring up the presentation, and then Essie and I will work the group through it and go from there. Okay, can folks see this? I'm going to make it a little bigger. Can folks see that?
We can, Keith.
Okay. All right. So here's what we're going to try to cover today. First, the committee did have a pretty extensive meeting January 31st, where it talked about the macro affordability issues. I've just got a slide just to remind folks of that. Then we're going to dig into the non-recommended reductions that Chair Rice just mentioned, provide an overview of that and council staff's recommendations on that. And then we do have some slides about some of the individual projects and countywides and systemics. The packet itself has a lot more detail. We're not going to get into that unless folks have specific questions. In general, staff felt that the projects that were requested by the board were justified, either for capacity reasons, facility reasons, systemic needs, things like that. So much of what we're talking about is affordability and prioritization. And that's really where we have to go today, is talk about those things. But to the degree there are specific questions about projects, we can certainly go there. This is just a quick summary of the numbers, looking at the amended CIP, the board's request, and the CE recommendation. Of particular note this year, and we talked about on January 31st, the executive recommendation is higher than the board, and we'll talk about that in a minute. That sort of complicates things a little bit, but it'll become clear as to why that is in a minute. And this is it. What did the executive add to the board's request? And what is the executive recommending in terms of affordability? This chart sort of summarizes that. First, there were a couple of items that the executive is recognizing in the CIP that were not in the board request just because of timing. The Clarksburg Elementary School number 9 amendment and several elementary schools in the major capital projects elementary project were approved by the council on January 11th. So the timing of it was such that they were not actually physically in the board's request, but they are actually happening and were approved, so they need to be added. So that's about $21 million in the 6-year period that the executive recognized in his recommended CIP that was transmitted. The other items that the executive did, he did include 2 new placeholder projects totaling about $98 million in the 6 years, mostly in the last few years of the CIP. And this was intended to try to better balance the CIP for basically for state aid reasons. But in the out years, as is common, the out years of the school CIP tend to be understated. Most of the projects tend to show spending in the early years. But in order to match state aid, we do have to have resources in those out years if we're also assuming state aid. So the executive did recommend some placeholder dollars in the out years for a match. In this case, it's shown as Built to Learn state aid match, and it's intended to provide some additional local match for that. And then the other big item is called Prevailing Wage. Because we have multiple pots of state aid that we are seeking now, in some cases, if even where Prevailing Wage increases the costs of capital projects, we are seeing that the state aid available for those projects under Prevailing Wage exceeds the Prevailing Wage cost bump. And that was exactly the case with these January 11th amendments I mentioned, the Clarksburg Elementary School number 9 and the major capital projects elementary. Even though the Prevailing Wage, the bids that came in under Prevailing Wage were higher than without, the state aid that it availed us was significantly higher. So it made sense from a financial standpoint to move forward with those. And we expect that to be the case with a number of other projects going forward. But what that means is we do have to actually add those dollars into the CIP somewhere. And so the executive did recommend a placeholder for that. So that's what you see. And that's why the numbers are higher. Now, even with that, if you assume those changes, the executive did have to still do an affordability reconciliation project. And we talked about this at the last meeting. That's the last project shown here. It's about a $65 million reduction in 6 years. But more immediately, you have the significant reductions needed in the first 3 years, and then some space in the later years. So what you're talking about, even more so than the reduction, is significant movement of dollars from the early years to the later years, or project deferrals. So a lot of what you're going to see in the non-recommended reductions are deferrals, more so than cuts. There are some cuts, and we'll talk about those, but more so you're seeing the expenditures pushed out in order to accommodate these numbers. Real quick on the macro assumptions, and this is one of the reasons why the executive had to do those affordability projects, both in schools, but also in the college and in parks. First, you have spending affordability. You have the 6-year bond funding level. The executive did recommend a little bit higher than what the council approved, 70 million higher in the last 4 years. However, the council in its spending affordability discussion earlier this month or earlier in February did not recommend that higher level. So we do have between the executive and the council's numbers right now, we do have that $70 million gap in the last 4 years. The executive also did recommend some significant increases in impact tax, not from any change in the taxes themselves, but just based on the flow of revenue coming in from those and revising the assumptions going forward for those under the current laws for those taxes. So that was a significant increase in the 6 years. The executive also did restore PAYGO to the 10% fiscal policy level, actually slightly above in a couple of years. So that's consistent with the county's policies, and we had to suspend that for a lot of the COVID-related affordability issues last year. Current revenue is up a little bit from the amended CIP. Not a lot, but that helps a little bit. And then importantly, state aid for school construction. This is a significant change from past years. We'd assumed a bump from Built to Learn a couple of years ago, and we had assumed more increases last year. But we really didn't know by project what we might get. There's still some uncertainty there, but this year the executive, or OMB really, worked to try to identify state aid more on a micro basis. How much are we going to get, or how much can we expect to get, or conservatively hope to get by project, rather than assume a flat number for the fiscal year going forward. And based on that, and based on the Built to Learn experience, which was very positive with some of those earlier projects I mentioned in our January 11th amendment, the executive was able to assume a significantly higher amount of state aid in the 6-year period, about $82.5 million. So that also had the effect of softening what his affordability reconciliation project had to be, and in turn, the non-recommended reductions we're seeing. While they are difficult and we see deferrals, it would have been a lot worse if we had not had this positive experience with state aid over the past few months, working with MCPS and with the state folks to finalize how the Built to Learn dollars eligibility would be calculated. And then as Chair Rice mentioned, we're still continuing to work on the broader state aid eligibility to try to work through some additional items that we think are fair statewide and that would also benefit us with additional state aid. So getting to the non-recommended reductions. This chart, once again, just sort of walks you through the board proposed CIP, the executive's recommended CIP, and then MCPS's non-recommended reductions in this case. As I mentioned, because the executive's number was higher, the non-recommended reductions actually have a net increase in the 6 years, but because of where the dollars are, you're seeing a lot of deferrals. So that's part of the confusion with this. But basically what you see is you see a revised MCPS CIP with the non-recommended reductions if they were all to be taken. You can see that. And then you can see the difference from the executive's recommended CIP. And it is pretty close. So from just a pure dollar standpoint, the non-recommended reductions get us closer to where we need to be, assuming the macro assumptions that we have before us today. Once again, if state aid were to go up or additional county revenues were to be made available, then that would soften the blow. But where we are today, this gets us pretty close with all of those non-recommended reductions. So we wanted to just summarize for the committee what these non-recommended reductions are. And we have, text, we have numbers, but we want to try to present that as best we can to you so everyone fully understands what's involved. And what you see are, you do see some changes in completion dates for a number of projects. Here it's mentioned, 8 projects that would have completion dates or construction schedules changed. You have some adjustments to some of the systemic projects. They had increases proposed by the board, so those increases would be lower, but overall you would still be seeing some increases in them. So that's, while it's not good news that we have to drop below what the board proposed for these non-recommended reductions, it is positive that we would still be better off than in the amended CIP. One new project requested, the Materials Management Relocation Project, would be removed. It would not be added to the CIP. It's not in the CIP now, and it would not be under these non-recommended reductions. And then also, and this is a little more complicated, the placeholder funds in the Prevailing Wage and Built to Learn, most of those would be allocated under these non-recommended reductions to specific projects. And they'd be intended to basically move those dollars out of the placeholders and into specific projects. And it, as noted earlier, it gets pretty close to the CE affordability mark. And this chart it's a little complicated, and it is in the packet, so I'll let folks read it in the packet. But it basically provides what's happening to each project. And we divided it up by individual school projects, the countywide and systemic projects, and then sort of by what's happening in each. And I'm going to walk through them just briefly to cover the high points, or low points, as you will. At the top, we have the Burtonsville Elementary School addition. This is a newly requested project by the board. The non-recommended reductions would keep it in the CIP, or would put it in the CIP, but it would be on a schedule that is 2 years later than what was proposed. So basically, the dollars that are in the proposed would all be pushed out 2 years. The Clarksburg Elementary School number 9 project, we mentioned that earlier. That's a technical adjustment to reflect the approved amendment. So that's in. So that's reality, and we need to reflect that. The Crown High School, we have a 1-year delay in completion to that. That's an ongoing project in the CIP. The planning funds would stay on their current schedule. So it's theoretically possible that project could be restored later if funds became available, but this would assume that the construction would be stretched out another year. Highland View Elementary School addition, another ongoing project. This would have a 2-year delay from what's in the approved CIP, although once again, planning funds would be maintained as they are. And then Northwood and Woodward, we want to speak to those together since they are linked. The Woodward High School reopening, and we can talk more about this with NCPS staff, they've identified that they're experiencing production delays with it based on their current construction conditions. And they have noted a completion of the reopening to September 2027, although the planning funds would remain in the project as they are. But what that means is that you also have its link with Northwood, which that facility upgrade was intended to have the students first move to Woodward. So that project's reflecting a 1-year delay in that project. And then the last one of the individuals is the Silver Spring International Middle School addition, which would also see its completion delayed 1 year. So those are the individual school projects. I'll let Essie walk us through the countywide and systemic projects.
Thank you. And I'll just highlight briefly that, again, as Keith was saying earlier, in these systemic projects, which again, we certainly know are very important to the facility upkeep of our schools and buildings. In these systemic projects, the board had requested fairly significant increases in the level of effort funding, which again, as we were saying, is certainly warranted. For affordability, the non-recommended reductions would reduce the proposed increases, but in most cases still leave some increased level of effort, or at least comparable to previous years. So in that respect, again, I felt that that was a prudent approach if reductions need to be made. Touching briefly on the major capital projects, the elementary schools,
Sorry about that.
That's okay. The elementary schools, again, do reflect the actions that the council took recently in January, and no further changes would be impacted there. In the secondary projects, there is, again, a non-recommended delay in both the Magruder and Wooten High School projects. It does maintain the funding, but again, as we're saying, just shifts those funds out a little bit in order to accommodate the fiscal constraints. Significantly here, the school system did reallocate those recommended placeholder dollars to Magruder and Wooten. Those are projects that previously had not reflected the increased costs needed for prevailing wage and other elements. Also significantly, there would be an increase here related to additional scope of work at Poolsville High School, which again is something that certainly the board and the council have heard significantly about. Just one other project to mention briefly, the materials management building relocation. That is the materials warehouse, which is a very important function that has needed some attention for some time. It is near the metro station in Rockville, and there's a shared interest in relocating it. There's not a finalized site for doing so. And so I think that this would be one where even if the funds needed to be removed from the CIP for affordability, certainly there would be continued effort to identify and explore those options. It would not, again, it would certainly not shut down that work. I think that is, again, the shared interest by all parties.
Okay, so as staff, we looked at these non-recommended reductions, and I'll show you some of the numbers later. And we have these suggestions. And once again, this is assuming where we are now with our macro CIP situation. And it's very important that we try to have a scenario that gets us closer to the baseline of the executive's recommended CIP at this time, so that if we do find additional resources, or if we don't, we are, the CIP is in a place where we can make it work. If we do find resources, then some of these items could potentially come back. And staff has the following suggestions. First, the technical adjustments I mentioned earlier, the January 11th amendments, those obviously have to be reflected. It's about $21 million in the 6 years CIP. The Woodward High School reopening, the production delays there, are what they are. And, we can talk to the schools about what's happening with that project. But once again, if reflecting reality means that there's a 1-year delay, then we should do that. I will say that both Woodward and Northwood are a huge portion of the dollars that are moved out of the first couple of years. I'll show the numbers in a minute. But really, the foundation of the non-recommended reductions working, as I showed earlier, does assume that the Woodward and Northwood projects are delayed a year. They are big high school projects with big numbers in the first few years. So those are big numbers. The other thing we suggest is accepting the cost increases reflected for the Wooten and Magruder projects. Once again, as Essie mentioned, you've got construction cost increases we experienced over the last 6 months with a number of projects. We also had the prevailing wage. And in these projects, we're going to need to reflect those dollars. So it makes sense to allocate those. And then the other delays, we do suggest, including the systemic projects, the other project delays. certainly if there's available funds, some of those may be able to be restored, depending on the dollar amounts. And then the one new item in here, the Poolsville High School phase 2 work I've noted here. Once again, we preliminarily accept that, but I think we would have to look and see where we are at reconciliation to see if that new work can be afforded, as we would do with any new project that is in the CIP. So in terms of restorations, these are our suggested priorities if additional funds do become available. First, we do have some critical work going on in systemics, ADA compliance, HVAC replacement, and PLAR. Those dollars also are not of the magnitude that you see for the high schools or even the elementary school or middle school projects. And they tend to be in 1 or 2 years, not across 4 or 5 years. So there's a little bit more flexibility when we do adjust these projects. And then second, we could consider trying to move back up the completion dates of some of the elementary schools, such as Burtonsville and Highland View, if dollars become available. And then third, to the degree we have additional dollars, we can look at some of the remaining projects. As I mentioned, we have a bunch of high school projects in the CIP right now, 5 high school projects. They are big projects, big chunks of dollars in early years. It's very hard to move those around in big chunks and make the CIP work. So that's going to be a challenge. And then it's very important to note, we will still need to continue to work very closely with MCPS and OMB regarding state aid, built to learn and prevailing wage allocations to make sure that the CIP is balanced, that as we make these adjustments, we're making the appropriate adjustments to other things that are impacted, like state aid. And to the degree we get more state aid, we can reflect that in the right places and make sure that the CIP is as balanced as we can make it. And we do have, of course, the rest of the CIP to deal with, not just schools. The council may very well want to see changes in the executive's recommendations in transportation or other areas. And so those will also have to be balanced in the end. So with that, I think I turn it back to Chair Rice for discussion. We do have some discussion of projects here, but I think we've got enough to talk about with the broader non-recommended reductions before we get into further details. So I'll turn it back to you, Chair Rice.
Well, thank you very much to you, Keith, as well as to Ms. McGuire. As always, incredibly thorough, incredibly informative to those that are watching so that they're aware of what's going on. And as far as the recommendations go, I think are incredibly important as well. I did want to acknowledge and make sure that we recognize the guests that we have with us today. I mentioned before Lynn Harris, who's with our Board of Education. We've got from OMB, Mary Beck, as well as Ms. Veronica Jawa, who's a fiscal and policy analyst with OMB. Mary Beck is the CIP manager. Seth Adams, director of our Department of Facilities Management with Montgomery County Public Schools. Adrienne Karamias, who is the director of Division of Capital Planning. I see Jeannie Dawson here as well. So thank you all for being here with us today as we discuss these very important issues. Let me just start off and I want to dispense of some of the easy things first, Mr. Levchenko. Obviously, the technical adjustments are something that we'll need to do. And so, Councilmember Juando, I don't think you have any issues with that in terms of the technical adjustments. And so we can signal our acceptance of that. Obviously, that's something that we have to do. I did want to start off in talking about some of the systemics, and I couldn't agree with you more. Those are projects that we know when it comes to ADA compliance, when it comes to HVAC and other kinds of things, that as we emerge out of this pandemic that's turning into an endemic, we need to make sure that we're keeping up with the upkeep in our schools. And so from that standpoint, I definitely think that should be a priority. I'm just speaking for myself, and we'll hear from Councilmember Juando. And I did want to note that unfortunately, Councilmember Navarro had a scheduling conflict So we'll make sure that she gets briefed on that and that we get information from her as to her preferences as well of where we may want to land on these particular projects. But those are some of the two to start with that I agree wholeheartedly with staff that are incredibly important. I will say this, and I watched intently as we built Seneca Valley High School. It's in my district. It's our most recent project. It was on time. It was delayed. It was back on time again. And it was 6 months delayed. Then it was a full year delayed. You know, a lot of these projects, and it just happens, right? It happens because of construction. It really wasn't about anything dealing with affordability at that point. The project was in the CIP. It was good to go, but, you know, things slip. And we understand that. And I understand that that's where we are with Northwood Woodward right now. I would say this, though. It's incredibly important for us to signal to this community that's been waiting a long time that we are going to do everything in our efforts to try and make sure we keep this project on track. And while I know that right now things may look dire in terms of being able to hold that, I do think it's important for us to make sure that the community knows and recognizes that we are trying to do our best to keep this very vital, important project on track. I know that that means money. I know that that means a lot of other things. So there are a lot of other pieces that are at play here as well. And I certainly understand that. And so while I'm not signaling today that we need to put it back in the CIP and we're saying that we're going to keep this on track, understanding that we've already heard from the school system that it's going to be difficult to do so, I do believe that it's important for us to see where the funding sources that are coming from the state will be with this upcoming session. And if there are ways working with our construction partners and others, we may be able to keep some aspects of this a little bit closer to its original completion date. So I'll just leave that there. When it comes to some of the other projects, I will say that I agree with you wholeheartedly with our elementary schools. When it comes to Silver Spring Middle, when it comes to some of these others, these are important projects as well. And so from that standpoint, if we do get additional funds from the state, and one of the things we always have to remember is it's not just state funding, but then we have to have money coming from the county as well. So it's a lot of puts and takes that will happen. I will say this, I have utmost confidence in our staff. And I'm not over-promising and under-delivering, but I know that they have been incredibly creative in working together to try and figure out the best way to move some of these agenda items forward. And so from that standpoint, the creativity that we've used in previous CIP years to really make sure that we can do everything we can to keep as many projects on track as possible has been a yeoman's job, and each and every one of you should be proud for the great work that you were able to accomplish in keeping things like what happened in Montgomery Village going with our project there. It really is just one of those where, again, our community is looking to us to be as creative and innovative as possible to make these things happen. And so from that standpoint, I remain confident in our staff that we will do everything we can to try and figure out how to make the pieces fit. So I did just want to close by saying one thing, and then I'll turn to Councilmember DeWanda with the shared materials management building relocation. I've gone to church at Mount Calvary Baptist Church, which is right down the street from where this building is located. I know the neighborhood incredibly well. I've been a member of that church since I was 13 years old. So some 30 odd years that we've been attending there. And I know that neighborhood and the concern that the neighborhood has, a neighborhood that's primarily African-American and Latinx, has about how that facility looks and how that then impacts the surrounding neighborhood. It is important for us, and I know that it's important for MCPS to figure out a way to move that project forward. I know that means finding a warehouse space. I know that MCPS has been working tirelessly to try and figure out a way to make this happen. But I will just say that while work is important, it is also important to have a finality. And I think that really at this point, we need to get to a place where we can say with finality, either we're going to do something to the space itself to make sure that it's commensurate with the neighborhood that continues to develop and grow and wants to see positive looking facilities that are in that area, or if we're going to move and do land swaps, whatever the case may be, that we really accelerate that conversation as well as decision making for that area. I've toured it. I've seen it. I've been out there with our partners from Rockville who are incredibly adamant about making something happen. So I did just want to turn to you, Mr. Adams, or to you, Ms. Dawson. I'm not sure who's best to talk about this, and just identify where we are at this point, because I know that folks are concerned about this, and I know it's a large chunk of change. I do understand that as well. But I really think that from the standpoint of when we talk about racial equity and social justice, this is one of those that's firmly in those crosshairs. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Rice, Chair Rice. Yes, this absolutely is a critical project for us. We've obviously talked about this site for years, obviously both from a neighborhood, from an equity standpoint, but also from an operations standpoint. So I can say that, you know, we while we were hopeful to have bond dollars for an endeavor such as this, we obviously knew that was going to be a challenge in the current fiscal climate. So we are exploring alternative options, alternative delivery options that would not, really compete against some of the other challenges, school challenges that we're seeing. And I would say there's actually really positive conversations, particularly around schools like Burtonsville. While we see a delay at Burtonsville, there's an opportunity to create a new school in a neighborhood and take advantage of that site for potentially the warehouse. So not necessarily requiring us to invest in additional properties, but really using our property and our inventory as strategically as possible. So I can assure you we are exploring all options, and we absolutely want to move off of that site as much as the city of Rockville and the residents would like us to. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you very much, Ms. Adams. That is exactly what I wanted to hear, and that continued look at innovative ways in which we can address this issue. That is what we expect. That is what I think our community as a whole needs, and especially that Stone Street, Neville Street community really wants to see have happen. So thank you very much for that. Let me turn to Councilmember Dewando for some questions and comments.
Thank you, Chair Rice. Appreciate your questions, and as always, the thorough job our staff does in preparing these documents. And I appreciated how you caught yourself there, Mr. Levchenko. You said, I think you said these are not what we want to happen. It's what it's what we have to prepare. Prepare for the worst and work for the best. I did want to ask one question, and then I want to ask something of Ms. Harris from the board who's here. But the gap, so before the non-recommended cuts, it was around 75 million. Is that correct?
You mean the gap just from the MCPS CIP perspective? Let's see, I'm just trying to bring it back on my own screen here. Well, basically, the Affordability Reconciliation Project is the internal gap that the executive had with the school CIP. You had those additions, right, but then you have the affordability reconciliation. That's about a $65 million 6-year gap. But more importantly, or more difficultly, the first 3 years are about $235 million
right
in gap. And then you have, I don't want to call it surplus, but you have capacity within the executive's recommended CIP in those last 3 years. That's, about 65 million less than that. So that's why what you're seeing in the non-recommended reductions mostly is deferrals, not so much cuts. You have some cuts in the systemics, but those are relatively, I don't want to say they're not insignificant, but they're relatively small.
Right.
What you're seeing are a big movement of dollars out
pushing
of those
things to later
years.
In the CIP to those later years.
Exactly. And that we may have to see some of that also in the other elements of the CIP, such as transportation or some of the other big areas. Typically, the early years are the most competitive years for dollars. That's where folks have projects that are defined that have started to move towards construction. And then, with our SAG limits, there's not a lot of flexibility. We're not seeing increases in bonds. So we're seeing construction cost increases. So that creates a squeeze in the school CIP, but elsewhere in the county CIP as well.
Sure. That's always an important point. We've got the transportation side, which we have to reconcile as well. Ms. Harris, I wanted to give you an opportunity from your perspective, and I know you don't speak for the entire board, but you are a member, and would love to ask if, based on this presentation, your thoughts on the difficulties here and what went into some of the choices you and your colleagues made in putting these cuts forward.
Thank you, Council Members Wando and Committee Chair Rice. I think, first of all, I just have to echo some of the comments you all have made and share my deep appreciation for the collective wisdom in this group. The CIP writ large is an incredibly complicated animal. And, I've been looking at these issues for years, both on the hyperlocal level and from a system-wide perspective. And when you try to engage people who may have an intense interest in an addition for their school, but you try to engage them in a conversation on the bigger countywide factors, and you start talking about things like recordation taxes and impact fees and PAYGO and SAG and, planned life cycle replacement and, subdivision staging, now growth policy, pretty much 2 minutes in, their eyes glaze over and you have lost them. So the complexities here are real, and that's why I so appreciate the literally decades and decades of wisdom and experience here. And also want to say I really appreciate the work that's happening with our state delegation around what has been a very long sort of tussle between the Interagency Commission and MCPS when it comes to funding our projects. And I think one of the things that I seem to be seeing is that, kind of some of the lines in the sand that MCPS has drawn over the years that we've committed to in our projects, which the IAC has not been willing to prioritize or sometimes fund. I think what we've been through in the pandemic is showing that some of those design and programmatic priorities we were setting are actually best practices if you want to serve students well. So I'm hopeful that the current reality that we've all gone through and some of the new work and the re-energized conversations between our delegation and the county partners here and the state folks is going to be realized even further, learn with, having a more generous perspective when the IAC looks at funding our project. And then I think that it's this is a marathon on a lot of these projects.
Yeah.
Thinking now about Highland View, and I appreciate Mr. Levchenko, your recommendations on particularly if we can, let's bump up those ADA projects because our students have spoken very clearly about them as a priority. And then we're talking now about Highland View, and that was my elementary school, my son's elementary school. And when he was in kindergarten, I went to a meeting in the library at Highland View with the architects and the MCPS folks about the new addition. And he graduated from high school last June, and there's never been a shovel in the ground. So it's a marathon on some of these projects, and I deeply appreciate that. But finally, I really appreciate the way we are looking at the swirl of circumstances that we find ourselves in. So yes, there's negative things, inflationary pressures, supply chain disruptions, materials that we can't get, contractors walking away from contracts, that sort of thing. But I also appreciate the way we're looking at this as an opportunity. And Mr. Adams has already talked about looking at the Burtonsville Elementary project and the need to move materials management off of Stone Street. And I just want to give those folks a shout out. I spent a couple of hours at Stone Street several weeks ago, and those folks in print graphics, those materials management folks, silk purse sow's ear out there. The way those people are working, keeping the school system moving, serving students, partnering with students, a lot of good work happening there. But when we look at the possible delays and relooks as an opportunity, especially some of the conversations we've been having collectively lately about the needs of our students and how well-being needs to be the first thing that we think about when we're wondering how we are going to help all of our students achieve their goals. and help them successfully navigate their more than 13 years when we're talking about pre-K. And so part of this conversation now, I think, is how do we ensure we're making spaces in our schools to bring necessary services that the school system doesn't necessarily provide, but that our students and their families need, and making sure we have space in our schools and in our MCPS facilities for those services to be delivered. Yeah. So we're talking about our positive youth development team and our street outreach network folks. We're talking about our health services folks and our wellness centers. And we're talking about legal services for our newcomer families. So I think this also gives us an opportunity to think about how can we create flexible spaces in schools when we're doing this CIP work that will permit us to bring those services into our spaces in a reliable way so that we can serve the needs of our students in the buildings that we want them to come to every day, and make sure that they are able to focus as much as possible on the work of learning instead of the external pressures that we know so many of them are facing right now. So I think, challenges, opportunities. And that's, so I really appreciate this conversation. I think that our facilities management staff has done a great job of identifying projects and ways to, as much as we can, continue working with community and communicating with community and, keep our projects moving forward, even if we're looking at that progress not being as fast as we had hoped, but still, you all have said it, plan for the worst, hope for the best.
I appreciate that. I really do, and appreciate your comments. And I couldn't agree more that that's what we're trying to do. And the point you reiterated that I kind of alluded to earlier of like designing space for what our kids need come for these next years coming out is critical. So I really appreciate that. Mr. Levchenko, something I was going to ask you, and Ms. Harris teed up really well for me. I think this will be my last question. That slide where you had kind of almost a tier of like the ADA compliance and then the Highland View. What are the numbers associated with restoring those things?
Let's see. If I share my screen again, I might be able to get to a slide that does that.
You always have a slide that does that. It's like
I hope so. Let's see.
He's always prepared.
Yeah.
Let me just see if I can get to some of those numbers at least.
Keith, I think it's on slide 8.
Slide 8. Well, this is the 6-year totals, but I think Mr. Joanna was concerned about what the string of numbers would be.
Oh, okay.
Which I do have. First, just for the individual school projects, I've brought up, let me just make this a little bigger. Okay. Whoops. Sorry, bear with me. Oh, there we go. Nope. Here we go. This is the slide I was trying to show. For Highland View, as an example, these are the delays or the change in expenditures in order to achieve the delay in the project. And you can see, unlike the high school projects, which have very, very large reductions in them in 23 and 24, the elementary schools have much smaller reductions. Now, they're still needed in order to get to the numbers, but if some additional funding becomes available, it's certainly more feasible to maybe find some dollars for a Highland View, for example, as opposed to, the Woodward Northwood situation.
For the millions watching at home, I won't leave Councilmember Rice alone in there and saying that he's the only one that says that. The -825, describe that for a normal person who's not a spreadsheet person, what that number means.
Well, Highland View had some planning dollars in it in 23, and then it starts to move into construction. The delay basically saves you about 1.8 million in 23 and about 6.4 in 24, and then a little bit less in 25 because you're starting construction work up. And then the construction then finishes up instead of in 25, it's finishing up in 26 and 27 or 27 and 28.
So just to be clear, for example, Highland View, roughly $10 million over the next 3 years to keep it on track. Is that
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing fun. The math isn't exact there, but
right. And the systemic projects are a little different because those are one-time hits in particular years, so you don't have a string of numbers affected.
Right.
With Highland View, you have to move it. You have to move it sort of in sequence. The planning and the construction has to be in sequence.
Has to be in sequence, right? Right, that makes sense. And then we see Burtonsville there, obviously, and then we see Crown, and yeah, that's helpful. I just would, I think I like to have a goal in mind, whether it's state money or what we need to do here at the county level to increase our contribution or revenue side. I think knowing what that is and how we might get there is important so that we can advocate at the state and then advocate, do what we need to do here locally. From my perspective, and I think you can stop sharing now, Keith. I just wanted to show that. From my perspective, I do think we need to restore, some things and find those funds. And while no one loves those delays of those high school projects, I think of that Northwood, Woodward situation of, it's the connected, and it's obviously a big need there. The fact that we can at least, 1 year keep it on somewhat in the pipeline and on track. Obviously a delay is a delay. That's important. I did want to ask about the 2-year delay. There was a 2-year delay for one of the high schools. Was it Crown? I can't remember which.
So I think it might be helpful if Mr. Adams could go through the dates on the high schools, because I think there's a lot of puts and takes between the fiscal years and the completion date years.
Sure.
Seth, do you want to just run through all the high school dates real quick?
Sure, and I think I just want to clarify, because on the chart that Mr. Lepchenko shows, he shows a completion date, but it's actually not aligned with the move-in date for students. So we have work that will continue after a move-in date. So Woodward and Northwood, we're projecting a 2026 move-in with work continuing into that following school year. So that's why Lepchenko shows a completion date of 27. Crown also shows a completion date of 27. But one of the things I really wanted to stress on Crown is that we actually want to start early and stretch the expenditures out so that we can afford them, so that we do maintain our commitment with the city of Gaithersburg around the investment in that property and meeting those milestone dates. And Poolsville, very similar. We have a move-in date for students into academic space in the 23 timeline, and then the phase 2 work, which we have asked for additional funding within this request, would follow behind. So there would be a couple of years, a year and a half of a final completion date for that, but they would be in their new academic space in the 2023 timeline. So I just wanted to clarify, because sometimes you see completion dates. That is a completion date when expenditures end, but we are working really hard to build and put students in new space as early as possible. And those dates are much earlier than what you're seeing is from a completion date.
That's helpful. I appreciate that. Work can still be going on while kids are moving in the building. So, all right. Well, I'll pause there. I think I've made it clear. Appreciate the work and the math wizardry, but I'm hopeful that we can work between the state and our local contribution to restore some of these things. And I'll be working with colleagues to do that. I really appreciate the efforts from everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you very much, Councilmember Duando and Board Member Harris, for that discussion. I think that Councilmember Duando, I agree with you wholeheartedly that I think when we're looking at these and that chart, Mr. Lepchenko, that you put up was very striking in terms of identifying how much easier it is to move multiple projects back if we indeed do get additional funds from the state versus one project, which would be a Northwood and Woodward project that would encompass all of those funds. And so it really is one in which, again, while it's a priority, and I think that, look, am I hopeful that the state, who's sitting on billions of dollars in surplus, would be able to help us to accelerate some of these projects? I am. And I would encourage folks who are watching who are in our education space who care about our CIP budget to make sure that they're reaching out to their delegates and senators and letting them know that we really want to see, and we can use the money now. And so that's why in these current years, it does matter. And so that investment can directly reflect something that would be happening in our own communities. So that's important for folks to know, because these one-time expenditures of funds in a time in which you have a surplus is exactly what the purpose is for, to help support and keep some of these projects on track. And they have the ability and the means to do so. So it's my hope that that happens. But if not, I think that we still find ourselves in a very good position. You heard that from Ms. Harris in terms of really the thoughtfulness that's going into this from the perspective of all of our staff who work together with MCPS, with our Office of Management and Budget, with our council staff, all coming together. And so I really just want to say thank you, because having us all on the same page is not where we've always been. I've been chair of the Education and Culture Committee for a while. And I know at times we butted heads when it came to some of this. And it's so refreshing to be in this place where we are all in this together and are all really trying to figure out the best way to move this forward. I do want to speak for Councilmember Navarro, because I think that it's important, because many people will say, well, why don't you just adjust the spending affordability guidelines? And as chair of government operations and fiscal policy, I can tell you that debt service continues to be one of the challenges that we really need to truly rein in as a county. It is something that could potentially at some point have an impact on our bond rating. And so we need to make sure that we are, as folks know, you can't spend up that credit card to the top limits and then not think that that interest rate eventually at some point is going to come to roost. And so that's really where we are at this point in terms of understanding that we've kind of reached that tipping point from a spending affordability guideline standpoint. And so we really have to look at other means. We have borrowed for so long when it comes to addressing our school infrastructure and our infrastructure countywide as a whole. And so it's high time that the state steps up and kind of gets us out of some of the challenges that we, as well as the other 23 jurisdictions across the state of Maryland, have found themselves in by forward funding a lot of these projects. And so from that standpoint, that's my plea to our state delegation to help us as much as they possibly can. And I know that they've done a lot, and I know that they'll continue to be there for us. So with that, I did want to give an opportunity, Ms. Beck. I know that you're here. And again, I've sang your praises in terms of really working with council staff as well as with MCPS staff, just to, if you had anything to add from the county executive's perspective in terms of your strategies and what you think, moving forward, how we can try and address maybe moving some of these projects back in if we do get additional state support.
Yeah, thank you. And any kudos that come to me really are built on the good work of Veronica Halla. She is the engine behind these calculations that have helped us realize this additional state aid. So I did want to give that mention. One thing, I don't know if it will go anywhere, but I think we all had a very reasonable request that the state consider one-time construction cost adjustments in the state aid figures. That would make a big difference, and that would really help in the early years when things are particularly tight. So I would hope that would help. I know we as a staff team need to get together and sort of crunch these numbers and just revalidate everything. But we've had a great partnership this whole process, and people let you know if there's anything different that we're finding, and we certainly will be looking for ways to maximize state aid. And again, a lot of the analysis that was involved with the OLO and some of the other efforts was so well timed with the state process and our work with IGR, and I just very productive process this year. And Seth and Adrian out helping with the lobbying, it's just been really tremendous.
Well, thank you very much, and Ms. Shawa, thank you again for good data is always important, and so those numbers have to be right. So thank you for doing that. And I also do want to shout out to our Office of Intergovernmental Affairs for the county as well, Ms. Melanie Winger, who I know has been working tirelessly, working with our state delegation to ensure that adjustments like this, whether it's added into Delegate McIntosh's bill or other free-floating bills that are out there that deal with these kinds of adjustments, are going to make significant differences. And I know they're working hard in Annapolis to make that happen. So again, this is a full court press. Everyone's on board. And I think that together we can hope for some additional funding, which may give us some additional flexibility when it comes to really making a difference in trying to keep some of these projects on track. But I do want to close just by saying that we do find ourselves, as I said in the opening comments, in a better position than we've seen in some CIPs of past. We really are looking at some delays, which are quite minor. As you heard from Councilmember Jawando, there's really one 2-year delay that is with Highland View Elementary School. But outside of that, we're looking at 1-year delays for the majority of these projects that are non-recommended reductions. There is a removal when it comes to materials management, but I think we've already addressed that and understand that there's some workings that are at play there. But I just want to reflect that because, this isn't, while it's not an optimal CIP for us, it's not something that is a nightmarish kind of scenario like we've had in years past. And so, this problem is solvable. And it really is solvable with some additional support from the state. I know I sound like a broken record here, but even more so, this is one where it's kind of easy for the state to jump in and actually make a lot of these issues go away. And so I'll keep my fingers crossed. I hope that folks around who are watching and who are on this call do as well. And we'll do our part when it comes to leveraging. I'm wearing my Mako pin today for a reason, because for the Maryland Association of Counties, this is a priority. When it comes to the education subcommittee that I chair, this is a priority, and we will be leveraging in Annapolis to make sure that folks understand just how important this is as well. This is an all hands on deck. So I look forward to working with each and every one of you to try and get us to an even better place than we find ourselves now when addressing the needs of our school system. So with that, I'm going to see, are there any other comments, questions before we close out? I think, Mr. Levchenko, you've got a signal from us and Ms. McGuire as to where we are in accepting of the technical adjustments. I mean, we're pretty much accepting of the recommendations that you have to this point. And obviously, as we look to additional funding from the state and additional revenue sources, potentially we can look at accelerating some of those projects. And you've heard some of the priorities from Councilmember Jawando and myself, and I'll make sure that I reach out to Councilmember Jawando and myself, and I'll make sure I reach out to Councilmember Navarro to see where she is in terms of some of those restoration priorities, as well as reaching out to Ms. Wolf and the board as well to have those conversations about ways in which we might be able to prioritize some of those that we may be able to build back. So, all right. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you again for all of your hard work, but we're not done. There's still plenty more to go before we get to that finish line. So I look forward to continuing to work with each and every one of you as we continue in that mission. So thank you so much. You guys take care and stay safe, and we are adjourned.